Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to actually, I think, our last panel of the conference, and we, in many ways, saved certainly one of the most interesting for last. If you've been involved in the innovation ecosystem or the venture investing universe in Florida for any period of time, you have certainly run into New World Angels. It is, I think, certainly the most well-established and probably the longest tenured angel group in the state. I don't know all the metrics, but I do know that pretty much it never ceases to amaze me the number of different industries represented by the members of New World Angels, the depth of knowledge somebody in the membership has about just about every industry under the sun. And we're very, very happy to have New World Angels as a longtime member of the Florida Venture Forum and as a sponsor of this conference. And we're very grateful, and my pleasure to introduce Steve O'Hara, President of New World Angels, to get us started on this panel. Steve?
Great, thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to take a little bit different tact at this today. We're breaking the seminar or the panel up into a few pieces. One, Ron Taro, Vice President of New World Angels, is going to take you through a general angel model. And there's lots of great angel groups out here in the marketplace. We are just one of them. And then we'll go switch gears and take you through some little bit more in depth of what to expect from New World Angels. In general, it's probably what most angel groups will look for, but you can obviously ask them their own processes. But we thought if we peeled back the curtain a little bit more, it might be helpful to you if you apply and get through the process. And specifically what we'll do, we'll have Sarah Lucas, our COO, take you through the application process, and Ron Taro will come back because he's also at screening. Then we're going to have some of our members say, okay, you got through the screening process, what does it take to get into diligence? And three of our members, Kathleen Crampton, is going to talk about how you might be able to better communicate your big picture problem and solution. Carl Trulevin is going to talk about some key areas we look at in terms of market size, addressable market, and your distinctions from competition. And Connie Galley is going to talk about, how we look at you and your team and what we look for in terms of that. And then we'll go take it a step deeper. Okay, you've made it into diligence, and because we do have 71 members, we do go across many industries. We've tried to group into a few industries that will try and give you some insights of what we look at in those variety industries. Kathleen Crampton has a deep experience in medical industry. We'll talk about medical devices. Bob Williams, who not only is New World Angels treasurer, co-founder, and member, but also is one of our entrepreneurs that we funded. He's a CFO at Egway. And so he's going to talk about the pharma stage. And the good news is Bob got turned down for funding 2 years in a row before we finally funded him. So he can tell some horror stories there. Kathleen's going to come back and talk about healthcare tech a little bit. Ron Taro will come back and talk about what we look for in consumer deals. Connie will come back when using her deep tech background, talk about the tech tractions. Then Bill Powers, there he is in the middle of my screen at least, who has a deep manufacturing background, is going to talk about what we look into a B2B manufacturing sort of investment. So with that said, Ron, do you want to take us through generally the general angel network opportunity?
Yeah, most certainly. So my comments here are going to be directed at, most investors understand the structure of the venture finance industry. This is really for founders to make sure you understand what you're dealing with when you're talking to an angel network. An angel network stands a little bit differently than a venture capital firm, and it is a collection of high net worth individuals. They've basically have come together to, in effect, establish some collaboration in making investments. The idea with the people coming together in these things, they come from very, very diverse backgrounds, as Steve had mentioned. They invest as a group because what you find out is a larger number with more milestones creates greater impact and lower risk, but also you can leverage the skills through collaboration of all the people. And so that's where it's at. The idea of an angel network is different than a venture fund. If you're a high net worth person, you can drop money into a venture fund, and then you rely on the professional investors to, in effect, vet potential investments for you, very much like a mutual fund in the public markets. In this case, what you're doing as a high net worth individual is you're looking for a deal flow, and you're reserving some autonomy on decisions for each of the on each of the possible investments coming through. You use New World for deal flow. On top of that, you can kind of argue that angel groups are sort of a DIY operation. The members themselves are carrying some of the due diligence. They actually earn equity for various contributions and governance. And so between all of that, what you've got is a group that's ultimately a social network of both active and retired professionals and peers, all from different industries. So the net from coming at us, what you can expect if you are a startup, is you're probably going to see us, we're not all finance majors, so you're going to see a deeper dive into your business in some regards. And the nature of this usually lengthens us out a little bit in the amount of time we spend with you before we make a decision. We'll talk a little bit more about diligence, etc. But do know that when it comes through screening and all the way through diligence, is you have a lot of eyes on your business from various perspectives. That's good news and bad news if you're coming at us for funding. But in general, it also means that we can add some interesting value on the back end because of our industry experiences. That's what I've got, and Steve, you can.
Great, thanks, Ron. So that's the general overview of what you look at. Now you want to apply, and how do you want to apply to New World Angels, and what are some advice to get through there? Sarah? Come off mute, Sarah.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry, it took me a second to get off of mute. Hold on.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so process. Anytime an entrepreneur is looking for funding, the advice that I will give to you is follow the directions. It's the simplest piece of information. We learn it when we're very small, and then we seem to forget it as we get older. So whomever you're looking to apply for funding with, make sure you know what their process is and follow it. For New World Angels, what that means is submit your application online, our website, newworldangels.com. We take a look at those applications every month. And no matter how well we know you, we knew Bob for years, but we still made him submit the application through our website. We use a portal called Gust, which is a software platform that helps centralize entrepreneur applications. And for New World, that's our process, but we encourage entrepreneurs to always diversify the audience of potential funders that they are looking at. So never put all your eggs in one basket. We would love to be able to fund all of the great ideas that we see, and we can't, and we don't. So make sure that you are getting to know all of the funders that have been a part of this event over the past 2 days. Unfortunately, there is no one centralized platform for you as an entrepreneur to simply submit your application and be done with it for all the groups. For New World, it's our website, it's Gust. For Tamiami or for Bridge Angel investors, it might be a different process. So keep that in mind and follow the directions of that group. And then lastly, make sure you understand your audience. New World tends to be what we refer to as industry agnostic. We've invested in all sorts of industries, and as Kevin mentioned, we do have subject matter expertise, both breadth and depth of subject matter expertise in a number of areas. But if you are a consumer packaged good company and you're applying to a firm that has a history of investing only in tech deals, probably not a fit. And you should find that out and know that early on. So takeaway here, follow the directions. For New World, anyone who's interested in applying to us for funding, our next deadline, we have monthly rolling deadlines, and the next one is actually tonight. So if you haven't yet submitted your application and you'd like us to look at it, please go ahead and do so.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And Ron, do you want to talk about, okay, they submitted their application. Now, what's the screening process like? Come off mute, Ron.
Yeah, so the structure is, and again, every group's going to have variations of this, but we basically queue up applications for 30 days. And then once a month, as Sarah mentioned, we're going to take a look. We have a screening group, roughly a dozen or more people who read everything coming in, and we score it. And we basically, for that month, a couple of options. One is we're going to invite you in for a live pitch to the screening group, see whether we like your story in real time. And then based on that, we'll either move you forward into a member meeting to pitch to the group, or we're going to do something we call a parking lot, which is, we like you, kind of have a sense that this is the right thing, but listen, we're going to send you home with some homework, right? You need a milestone to bring us to bring yourself forward into our group. There's information we don't understand or is not available. So from a screening standpoint, we basically are on 30-day cycles, and you come through our funnel. Top 6 each month get a live pitch. 3 come to the members for review. And one of the outcomes of that could be you get to sit on the parking lot with homework to prove yourself back out and be considered in a later month.
Thanks, Ron. The only thing I'd add to that is we get about 24 applications a month. Some months a little bit more, some months a couple less. But so the numbers work out, say 24 apply, 6 get chosen to present in person, 3 get to the members, and then we take roughly about 24, 25 of those into diligence, and we'll fund 3 to 4 new companies a year out of diligence. And we'll go talk about what you can do when you get to the members now, and what can help you get into diligence. Kathleen Crampton, when someone comes up to the member meeting and you see them, and what are you looking for? What do they do to convince you that they've got a great idea and that you want to move forward with them? Come off mute, Kathleen. Come off mute, Kathleen. Kathleen, come off mute.
Okay, I'm off. Hi, everybody. Well, it is very important. You will have about 10 minutes to speak in front of our membership. We will have somewhere between, depending on which venue you go to, probably in the smaller venues, I'm going to say 8 or 10 people. In the larger venues, you'll have about 30 people. I might add, we're all eating dinner at the time. So back in the olden days when we used to get together and eat dinners. So you've got to be crisp, clear, and concise. So let me be a little bit more specific. So I think about 3 areas. I think about the product. What are you talking about? What is your management structure or your governance structure? And the third one is, what's your business plan? So let me be a little more detailed around those 3 areas. So product, what is it? Describe it. If you have a sample of it, bring it. Let us pass it around the table. Is it understandable to the average investor? Now, there are some products that we've invested in that to this day, I don't know what we've invested in. But for the most part, you need to be able to explain to a group of 30 or 40 individuals who've had a lot of experience what it is you do in simple language. Whose need are you meeting? Be clear about that. Now, my own background is healthcare, so I'll use more healthcare, but be very clear. This is going to be of interest to hospitals. This is going to be of interest to mothers with small children. Be very clear about what it is that you're thinking about. And then how is it going to be of value to them? Now, if your market is a hospital, obviously they're going to be probably looking for better outcomes, less risk. On the other hand, if you're looking for value to a mother, it may be a child who's not going to cry so much, or who's, if it's an inhaler, that sort of thing, how much easier is it for a family? So be clear about what the product is and what the value is. Also, does the product exist? Many times we have people who come to talk to us who have a vision of what it's going to look like, but in fact, it doesn't really exist. And as Ron said, it will get very quickly clear to us that it's more of an idea than it is a reality, and you may find yourself in the parking lot. That's both the good news and the bad news. So that's not all bad, as Bob can tell you. And then, has it actually been used somewhere? we're very interested in having testimonials. We're interested in hearing that, you know, the XYZ physician group has used this particular inhaler and they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm not talking about full clinical trials here, but I'm talking about testimonials, people who can talk about that kind of stuff. Moving on to management structure, we always like to know who it is who's going to be running the company. Our phrase is, who is the jockey here? And we want to know who you are, why we ought to put our money on you. Have you done this sort of thing before? What kind of experience have you had? How did you get here? We like to hear the story of why, how did you learn about all this? And then the last, of course, is business plan. You know, how are you going to actually make this happen? Now, let me assure you, we're not looking for something we think is going to actually be the go-to-market plan that you're going to have and you're going to use it forever, because things change. But we want you to have thought it through. What is your distribution channel? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? All of what I'm going to call the sort of nickel and dime major issues. And that's what we like to hear from you and when you give your 10-minute presentation. I think I'll stop here, Steve, and we can come back later.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. I especially want to emphasize the business plan. I often get asked by entrepreneurs, do I need a business plan? Or business plans are so outdated because a number of schools are teaching that. Hey, if your investors want a business plan, write a business plan. If you can't write a business plan, how are we supposed to have confidence in investing in you? And so from that aspect, I always encourage entrepreneurs to have an business plan. And again, we don't treat it as gospel. Carl, Kathleen covered a lot of territory, but you know, there's specific areas that are really important when we decide to go to diligence, like market size, addressable market, and competition and distinctiveness there. What do you look for? And Carl, by the way, not only is a New World Angels member, but he also runs Westlake Ventures. So he does investing on multiple fronts. Go ahead, Carl.
Thanks, Steve, and everyone. A couple different things I think are really important. First, we'll start with markets, and we want to make sure that the market is pretty big, ideally $1 billion opportunity. It could be less than that, but if it gets much less than a few $100 million as a potential market size, probably not going to be a great opportunity that we really want to look at. And actually, the market can be too small in two different ways. One, of course, is it's really too small. Like, for example, maybe an app that you would have on the internet. It probably is just a little niche and it's too small for us. But there's actually another type of too small opportunity. And it's what I call kind of an irony. And that is often what we really want are truly innovative ideas, something that's really groundbreaking. The problem with really groundbreaking ideas, though, is that they're really unknown. Let me give you a couple examples. Think back when Xerox and IBM first got started. And you may well have heard the stories about these, that they went out and did market studies. And in both cases, they said, oh, there's no market for computers. There's no market for this copy machine. And of course, we laugh today and say, oh, of course there was. The problem is we have the benefit of hindsight. We aren't where those people were at the time. And the problem is that people couldn't see how that product was actually going to be used. So here's the irony. If you've got a true innovation, you've got to be able to show how you're going to really take this and turn it into something really new. That probably is going to take some vision and storytelling for us to be able to see where this new thing is really going to change the world that's out there. Another thing to look at, of course, are adjacent markets to where you're starting, and also possibilities through your channel partners if you've got them. But size of the total market is really important. Second thing, of course, is competition. And of course, the worst thing we want to hear is somebody come in and say, oh, I don't have any competition. Well, you probably just got yourself an exit pass by saying that. Everybody's got competition. And there are really two forms of competition that we want you to look at. One, of course, is maybe new companies that are also like you trying to get started out there. But the other one, competition that you want to look at is the status quo. In other words, how do current companies and businesses solve the problem that you're trying to solve? And you've got to then show us how you're going to differentiate from that. So you want to keep, both of those things in mind. Another one, I have a particular, one of my own particular peeves are what I call competition charts. And that's the chart you put up there that shows, you and all the other companies out there. And then you show different features or benefits. And of course, it's always that the competition has maybe 1 or 2 or 3 checks. And yours, of course, everything is checked off. Well, how relevant are those criteria? You're going to need to be able to show why those things are really, really important. Are they going to really make a difference for you? And 2 other things I think are really important that oftentimes get overlooked. And the first question really is, especially in B2B, is what are you doing for your eventual customer? And you've got to be doing one of 3 things. Either you've got to show how your product helps them make money, save money, or increase productivity. And too oftentimes we see presentations that don't really address that. It's not well thought through. But at the end of the day, if you don't do 1 or more of those things, then you probably don't have a business. So you want to look very, very carefully at just that sort of thing. Final thing I'll talk about would be distribution. Too oftentimes we find companies have really thought through their product, but they have not really thought through how it's going to be distributed. And oftentimes it comes down to, there are already products out there that are being distributed. You've got to show us how you're going to actually get those people to distribute your product instead of the incumbent's product. A whole bunch of things that could be critical. Steve?
Great, thanks very much, Carl. Before we move on to specific industries, let's go one more step in depth in terms of what might be relevant in terms of getting into due diligence, and that's your team and how you're going to operate. And Connie Galley, who comes out of a tech background, will share some of her thoughts on that.
Thanks, Steve, and hello, everybody. Yes, when you think about what your team brings to the table and why we want to listen to you and why we'd have confidence in you, then your background story becomes very important, as others have mentioned. Your credentials, your technology background, perhaps, your business background, your education. But I would also encourage you to be a little more personal. Sometimes it's the stories that you talk about from a personal standpoint. What did you do as a kid? Did you have summer jobs? Did you work with your family business and you know how hard it is to work and you know how to work hard? That's really important. And how did you put your team together? Where did you meet? And what were you trying to fill in when your team got together? And it's the stories that people remember. You can put up the slide with all the background of everybody in the company and your board and the board of advisors, but it's really the stories tell you how you got to this point that I think is what sticks with people. And then, of course, to demonstrate along with that background how you understand the customers that you're going to be addressing. But to me, the thing that makes the biggest impression when I see a pitch is not just, I've got $1 billion market I'm going to address, or a $10 billion market, and here's how my growth is going to be because I'm going to get 1% of this market ultimately, and that's going to make me this big. What I really react to is if somebody can look at that multi-billion-dollar market and pick a segment where they say, it's this segment that I'm going to go to first where I can win. My goal is to be number 1 in that segment, even if it means I kind of have to invent the terminology used to define that segment. So once you have said, here's where I'm going to go to that segment, then you can then talk about what is my distribution channel to that market that I've chosen, and what is the product. The product I have maybe was built to go after that, but if it's clearly defined, then that determines what channels you're going to use to get there. And that slide that I think Carl talked about with your product features doesn't just become a competitive analysis of our product versus others and what don't they have in terms of functions. it becomes a competitive analysis in terms of, I see this segment, nobody's going after this through distribution channels. And we have a relationship with this great channel. Or right now, I know an influencer in that market, or maybe they're on my board of advisors. And therefore, I can get to that segment faster. Now, in terms of tech, which Steve mentioned, tech's moving fast, always. And so anytime you can get to a market and try to dominate that segment that you're in, faster, better, cheaper, then you've got a leg up and start to leverage that. So to me, it's not just the big market that would give me confidence, but if you define a segment of that market where you can enter and then gain your real competitive advantage, that makes a big impression on me.
Thanks, Connie. I think we all know too, and that probably one of our biggest frustrations is when an entrepreneur comes and say, well, I am the management team, and there's no thought process behind it of who they're going to hire, what criteria they're going to hire, where's the org chart. If you are a single entrepreneur management team because you haven't been funded, we understand that, but put some thought into the team, as Connie just said, that the team will fit with the distribution channels and the other issues that Carl and Kathleen and Connie talked about. And then you'll get a lot more credit for thinking through what your organization structure and team is. Okay, so you've gotten through the screening process, you've made it into due diligence, and now you've got some diligence teams going on. And now we'll go take it down to individual market areas, things that we'll really pick on in the diligence to look to see if you have it. Kathleen, medical devices. What are you really looking for to get excited about a medical device? What tells you there's traction here that it's going to be successful?
Well, you know, we're a good one to start with because there's a lot of clarity, in my opinion, about this sort of thing. The first thing that we'll all look for, again, is who is the client here? Is it a physician? Is it a patient? Very, very different considerations. Also, the regulatory environment. Do you have to go through the FDA? Are you what's called a 510K? Have you done any trials? Where have you done them? Is this a short, you know, is there a previous predicate? Is there not? All of that kind of stuff needs to be addressed and tight, because you can't move ahead if you don't have the regulatory environment behind you. You also need, and once you get the regulatory environment behind you and approving you, you can then get the second most important thing, honestly, which is reimbursement, which means you've got to understand CPT codes. You need to understand DRGs. You need to understand the whole process by which your product may fit into the overall delivery of healthcare. Will you reduce length of stay? That is the number of days that a patient stays in the hospital. That's very important to hospitals. So you need to be able to explain to the hospitals or to the insurance companies or to whomever the payer is, it might be an employer in some set of circumstances, why buying this product is going to produce a better outcome, not only for the patient, but also for their bottom line, which also gets me to the issue of risk. A big issue in healthcare is risk. That is, you want to reduce the opportunity to get sued. So if there's a way that you can contribute, your product can contribute by lowering the risk to a hospital or to a physician, that's also very important. And then last but not least is really the technology. How is this going to fit into the rest of the technology in healthcare? There is a revolution in healthcare right now that's going on, and it is just key that, that you understand, will your data flow through to the hospital's IT systems, et cetera, to Cerner or to Epic or to any of the big systems? How does all of that integration take place? I think I'll stop there, Steve, and we can come back if you need more.
Sure. One follow-up question, Kathleen. To you, what's the right proof of concept or traction you want to see in a medical device that says, okay, they're ready for us, or no, they really should go to the parking lot?
Yeah, it needs to work. And we have an example. I think that's what Steve's talking about here. We had a particular product. It was an IUD actually, which particularly those of us who are women involved in this, we were very enthusiastic about it, and it raised a lot of money and did a lot of stuff. And when they finally got it out there to test it with women, honestly, it didn't work. So you need to be able to say, yes, the product actually works. And you don't need a lot of tests, but you need, you know, the name of Dr. Smith or Jones or whomever who comes from the XYZ Medical Center, who can say, we tested it on 20 of our patients, and boy, it wasn't a clinical trial, but the thing really works, and we're thrilled with the outcome. Does that answer it for you, Steve?
That's terrific. Thanks, Kathleen. Bob, you have experience on both sides of the coin here, and you have a lot of experience in the pharma industry. How about, what are you thinking in terms of pharma?
Well, one of the first things that is said is that angels don't, in fact, invest in life science business. And at least from my point of view in New World Angels, over a quarter of our investments are, in fact, in life science. And more importantly, our 3 best exits were life science exits. So there's some good reason that we look at these, because first, it's a massive industry. 19% of the United States gross domestic product is spent on the life science industry and health. A couple of critical observations, and these will in some way mirror what Kathleen was saying, as well as others. But I think the most important thing that I would say to any entrepreneur approaching us with a life science investment, whether it be a therapeutic or a device or a digital product or what have you, is you've got to be an awful lot better than the gold standard. For those who don't know the term, gold standard in the medical business is basically the go-to standard that a physician will use, whether he's treating an appendicitis or almost anything else. And it's got to be a lot better. And the reason that it has to be a whole lot better is because the medical industry is risk averse, for good reason, because if you screw up, you kill people, which is generally not a good thing. And so the doctor practicing saying, look, I know how to use this device. I know that this therapeutic is useful and works fairly well. So you come to that marketplace, you have to say, look, this is very substantially better, provides better outcomes for the patient, might be easier to use by the physician, might decrease the amount of time spent in hospital. By the way, that notion is generally true. You really have to know and understand your market. I think all of us in the world have been frustrated by the fact we've had people come in with ideas and say, whether it's a consumer product or a medical device or what have you. And our first question is, did you really look carefully at the market? Did you do a Google search? Did you go onto Amazon and see if you can buy this already? And too often we found that this brilliant idea that's brand new is actually available in the market today. Secondly, time to market is very important in everything for us. And that's because of the magic words FDA. The FDA takes its own sweet time about approving most medical products used in the marketplace. Steve talked a little bit earlier about the fact that I'm also a co-founder of a firm called Egley Therapeutics. And when we came to New World a couple of years ago, they said, no, we really want to see if you can get, in our case, INDs, which are the FDA approval of going into the market. So when we came back to New World, we had 2 approved INDs, and we're able to go into the clinic fairly quickly. On top of it, one of the indications is one that had an orphan indication possibility. We have since received both an orphan indication to do that, and this then gets you an opportunity to get into the marketplace and making revenue much more quickly. Timing is an awful important thing in life science investing. I'd also add as sort of a closing point that we've seen a number of people in digital delivery of some sort or another, whether it be telemedicine, psychological delivery of service. It's a very crowded marketplace at this point. And unlike some of the other therapeutic or diagnostic areas where there's not a lot of competition, there is a lot of competition there. And you have to really be able to come to us and say very clearly, this is why we're better, this is why we can get a segment of this market, because it's fairly easy for others to come in and compete against you. Steve, back to you.
Yeah, Bob, just one follow-up question, because you have a unique situation by also being the entrepreneur in residence at the University of Miami. When someone's doing a medical deal or such an innovative deal like pharma or something like that, how can they find out what's going on in the various university labs around the country? Because so much is happening in the labs around the country that it's staggering what we find from a competitive point of view.
Well, it is, and it's also very difficult to find out. There are a couple of different places where you can go in and look and see what the NIH or the FDA or the military is funded by way of research. And you can go onto these sites and say what research is going on and find if there's research running parallel to what you're doing. Also, the other thing you should do is hire good patent counsel, and they can help you in fact search that which is going to give you an indication of who's out there doing something similar to this at this time. It's, you know, nevertheless, you often find yourself stumbling forwards with an idea, and then suddenly somebody comes out from, you know, the University of Houston or UCLA or something like that that has the product in it. But there are things that can be done, and the thing that I think, again, we find frustrating is that sort of basic market research hasn't been done by some of the companies coming in to us. And, you know, when we're sitting there in their presentation doing, you know, on our device doing a Google search and finding 3 things like it, it gets a little embarrassing for the entrepreneur standing up there.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more to that. Something we do often when we see these sorts of deals come through is we go to the government website on clinical trials and say, are there any clinical trials out there? Yeah. And it is embarrassing when you find out there's 3 clinical trials going on this great new idea that you say is innovative. And so you should know, you know, before you come to us, you should do your own research on that if you're doing this sort of thing.
Yeah,
Kathleen,
and that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say, Steve, I think that's true for all products that we look at, you know, all ideas that we look at. We're very frustrated that people come in and we're sitting there doing a simple search and we come and say, you know, this toothbrush exists already or something like that.
Right. Kathleen, last part of medical before we get on to everything else that we do. Talk a little bit about healthcare tech. You know, we see a lot of deals where people can come in, they say they go revolutionize the doctor's office or do this or that with the hospitals. What do we look for in healthcare tech that might be unique from what you've already said?
Well, the key thing here is to understand, first of all, you need to really understand the systems that exist already. You need to understand the difference between hospital-based systems and medical center systems and physician-based systems. And you need to be able to understand where your IT effort may fit. There's a lot going on right now with taking what I call administrative processes and packaging them and saying to basically patients, you fill out all these forms before you get here. You send them to us, then we'll load that up into our, let's say, Cerner system. And when you get here, we'll have that all in place. And then that becomes the groundwork or the holding set of data that is then used for that hospital admission. And then they will collect information, and it may come from radiology, it may come from the lab, it may come from, you know, all over the place, and that will get funneled into this medical record. And all of that integration, it sounds so easy. Well, we'll just send it from here over to there and we'll da-da-da-da. You have no idea how complicated it is to get all of the data lined up in a way that allows it to, yes, get where it's going. Because the last thing you want is Mary Smith X-ray to show up in Susie Brown's medical record. And it is not easy to do that. And it is also very expensive. So you really need to understand that. You know, the word API, I feel like the world is nothing but an API these days. All of the integration that's taking place. This is a good thing, by the way. And if you were able to play in this world and become a partner, it's great value that you bring to the table. But it is rare to find an entity that honestly, these big systems, and I'm talking Cerner or Epic, that haven't already, you know, figured out how to do that already. So I don't know, Steve, I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer here, but it is it's complicated. Oh, and the other thing is it's very expensive, because anytime you add something or change something, you've got all these huge systems and you have to stop them or whatever, and you have to run parallel. Oh, I love running parallel systems. Because that's, you know, so it's not an easy thing to do. I see Connie laughing over there.
Well, that's a great segue to Connie too, because we're down about 10 minutes. We have 3 more categories to go through. But I'll just also ask, or also say, we often are surprised that people are trying to sell into one part of the system when there's multiple decision makers on the system, and that's such a failure in so many medical tech areas. Connie, talk to us about tech in general and what you look for in tech traction to get excited about investing.
Sure. Well, as we all know, as I mentioned before, tech moves fast. And that's both the good news for people introducing new products, and that can be a negative as well. Because if you're not focused, if you don't exactly know what the market is that you're addressing at that time, you lose time. And time when you're introducing tech products is really all important. You got to be fast and you got to have focus. Now, what we like to see that gets us excited is if you've defined where you're going, what is your initial market that you're going for? And when you come to us and you say, well, here's some customers I have, not all over the board that might distract you, but they're right in the sweet spot of where we want to be. And if you have those customers, and if they're willing to be references, you know, that's really great. And if you have those influencers in the market on your side, and if you have maybe defined your own market segment where you have pundits in the market saying, oh, well, these guys know the such and such market. They're #1 in that such and, I mean, that's terrific. And of course, if you can see that you have the revenue, that is also a proof point. Now, when you come to an angel investing, you're there because you're looking for money. And at that time, if you have some of those proof points, what do you need the money for? I mean, some people need a little bit more patents. Maybe they already have one, but they need to expand their portfolio of patents. More than likely, there could be at this point where the entrepreneurs, the whole initial management team, has been really doing most of the selling and most of the marketing and most of the explaining to the marketplace. But if you've gained some traction, what's really important about that is that now you can offload some of that. You can define your message and you can define what it takes to make those sales, and you know where to go next. And then you can hire people where you know the background of what you want in those other people and give them that message and help train them because you're already knowing what to do. So to me, the proof of traction that you've got those kind of elements in place in your chosen market and you've been able to explain that, that to me gets me pretty excited.
Great, thanks, Connie. Bill Powers, nothing more different than tech than business to business and manufacturing, but you come out with a lot of background there, and I know you've served, you and I have served on a couple of due diligence teams in this area, and I've learned from you. Talk to us about what you look for in a manufacturing or business to business opportunity.
Thank you, Steve, and hello, everybody. If I'm thinking manufacturing, when you come to us, we want to know what stage your product is in. And if I'm looking ahead to manufacturing, I'm wondering which of these 3 stages is it in? Demo, that is, you have a function for your product, and have you only made a demo of it, and you haven't figured out how to manufacture it yet? And we see that in a lot of early companies. Second is you've taken it a little further and you've actually made it where you know how to manufacture it and you have all the functions working. And then finally, which we rarely see, a product that's ready to be produced and you even are in the first stages of setting up your manufacturing lines. Now, as has been stated earlier by the others, is customers. You have to know what your customer base is. Have you done any beta testing, any market research? And by the way, sometimes you'll fail market research, as has already been mentioned, because the product is so unique, but sometimes that's very rare. With respect to the product, what is its uniqueness, and do you have intellectual property protection? Do you have patents? Do you have patents pending? We want to know that. The ideal product is one that will surprise and delight us. We'll just all look around the table and we'll say, we've never seen this before. This is really great. You usually then are looking ahead. You're going to make the first product, then you're going to have add-ons, maybe derivative products. And we call that a cycle plan. That is by year and by money in many cases and by product. And then finally, you're very lucky. At this point in time, there is great software for product development. These packages will allow you to build a solid model of your product, which makes it ready for manufacturing. And these also have ready-made parts databases, which will become important, as I say, in a few minutes. Okay, now we're ready to manufacture it. You go to any manufacturing company and there are three magic words: quality, cost, and timing. You have to know how to control the quality of your product, and you always want to improve that. You also want to get costs under control and have a cost process. And then timing. When is it going to market? Not just now, but possibly in the future for second generation products. I've also added another word, and that's value. In some sense, Apple doesn't worry as much about cost, even though they keep their costs under control. They're really worried about value because they know they can charge more. And so you really want a product where value will be key and it will be not just be cost driven. When you go to manufacture, you'll usually have a couple of choices, either in-house or contract manufacturing. Many of the companies we see, they have to start out with contract manufacturing while they're thinking of what their ultimate manufacturing capability will be. What we've seen with some companies, if they start with contract, then they go to in-house because of the secret sauce involved. Then looking ahead, will you need more capital, like from venture capitalists, if you're going to build a main production line? And then suppliers. You're working with suppliers who are going to give parts to you. And then how are you going to receive those parts, the logistics of it? And we have a term that's come from the NASA era called UNCUNCs, unknown unknowns. For example, the pandemic and the 2008 Black Swan event. These can disrupt everything, and in some sense, you have to be a little bit aware that that could happen. And then finally, you need processes for all this: a quality process, a cost control process, and then continuous improvement. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bill. Ron, you have 90 seconds to take us through consumer. Come off mute, Ron.
Okay. I'm going to ignore everything on here and focus on a couple things. If you're coming in with a consumer, here's how you're going to make us happy. Because one of the first things we're going to look at is this whole not better enough, that thing right in the middle. You know, if I'm a new bank, how hard is it to change banks? That kind of problem. So it's been discussed already. I'm going to set it aside. But if you're going to bring us a consumer product, especially with technology, there's a couple of things that make it very interesting to us. One is organic growth. Market pull is better than market push, right? Are the fish jumping in the boat and I don't even have to bait the hook? Some sort of sense that there's network effects going on that can bring stuff in. And consumers, that's a very, very big deal. The other one is user engagement. You come at us and you say, oh, I sold 100 of these. And then the answer is, well, and one of the 100 is actually using it, right? That doesn't really portend well to your organic growth story. So we're going to peek at that. And then I would just add scale math. You know, the idea of your market size and your margin, they're inversely proportional. A niche market got to have high margin. Big commodity, you can have low margin. But the reality is you got to be able to fund growth. So if you bring to your presentation a couple of things, I put a couple of acronyms there. CPL, cost per lead or cost per action, right? How much is that? Cost per total customer acquisition. Weighed against their lifetime value of the customer. Your churn, are you running in place, and stickiness? And just in general, your channel economics. Who's taking how much money from you? So if you look at if you bring all those things into a consumer product presentation, you've gone a long way to getting us comfortable.
Great, thanks, Ron, and thanks for doing it so quickly. Panelists, thank you very much for all your time here. And viewers, I hope this has helped you understand how to navigate the angel networks that are out there, and maybe especially New World Angels, and how we look at things. Other angel networks may have their own twists, and we encourage you to talk to them about their twists. But this gives you, I think, a good baseline of what typical angel investors might look at. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you all sometime in your future and our future with our 71 members and growing. And hopefully we can fund you someday. Thanks everyone for joining us. The virtual cocktail party is going on, so switch gears and go back to the virtual cocktail party. Have a good night, everyone.